it's pretty dope.
Amazing. And I just want to keep this energy going. Honestly, Tabasco, I think I met you in Dubai, and the interesting part was I saw your watch and I was like, "Whoa, this is an interesting watch," and I need to get this one. And today, for everybody who is viewing the stream right now, I have Tabasco from Particle Network with me, who is here to speak about Particle Network and understand more how we are on the forefront of uh, Particle Network and Spheron, and why we are building infrastructure to onboard the masses to crypto. Because once we see this, that there is a lot of problem in terms of when you say consumer facing apps, you see that everybody is so much into building infra, or everybody is deep down just building infra itself, that right now we need a solution which is more prominent on building towards apps, and that is what we have been focusing on right now. And we have been doing this, and something I want to tell you all about Tech Fusion, the series AI GPUs and beyond. Like, why do we say it AI GPUs and beyond? Because AI is one of the things which is prominent right now, but it roots from GPUs, uh, and beyond is the use cases being built on top of it. Like you see today, applications like Cursor, Tailwind, and coming into forefront, and being developer facing and also consumer facing apps coming day to day. And we would want the same thing happen in Web3 as well. So this is the reason Spheron started with Tech Fusion, to get people who are very active in the space. There are, like, I personally know that I've been using an app called EtherSign, and Particle Network is one of the authentication and signing services for it. So this is what consumer facing I am today speaking on. And today we have Tabasco with us, and he's going to shed more light upon how what Particle Network is doing to enable all of that. Tabasco, can you introduce yourself and then people what you guys are building upon?
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I appreciate the great context there. I remember when I ran into you in Dubai. I think it was on the yacht with Avail, the Avail
Yeah,
event, and
yeah,
so that was a good event. I think if I'm actually doing a roundtable with Kyle from Avail in a few hours, and so their team's awesome. They always crush it. But anyways,
yeah.
yeah, as a quick intro, my name is Tabasco. That's not my real name, of course. My real name is Ethan. I just use Tabasco on Twitter. And I lead developer relations at Particle Network. I've been doing developer relations in the space for, I guess, almost 4 years now. I was going to say 3 years, but coming up on 4 years. Previously, I did developer relations at an RPC provider for a long time, and then I have been at Particle now for almost a year. So I think 11 and a half months or something like that. And so the kind of TLDR on what we're doing on Particle, for our entire history and even what we do today, it's always been centered around sort of like solving a lot of core UX problems in the space. And how do we really improve the experience to a degree that allows more general users and consumers to use applications in a way that feels natural and familiar? And so, like, one of our initial main products that you mentioned with eSign, for example, was social logins. And so social logins and authentication was and still is a core product of ours for a long time, which is essentially just SDKs that allow applications to onboard users into wallets using their Google or their Twitter or their email and phone number. So basically using dApps with a full-on wallet, doing transactions with nothing more than your social account. So this is a big step because it means that you, as a Web2 user, you don't need to download MetaMask or manage a seed phrase or anything that's usually associated with getting started in Web3. You can just go to an application that you want to use, like eSign or many others that have integrated us, and choose your Google account or input your email, and then you have a wallet that you can start using. And so this was like our first main large UX facing product. And then we sort of evolved this product into utilizing account abstraction, especially over the past 12 months or so. So basically not only getting users into a wallet using social login, but specifically getting users into a smart account. Because of course, for those that are familiar with account abstraction, you can do a lot of really cool things with account abstraction and with smart accounts. You can do gasless transactions, and it's a little bit safer and more secure sometimes because you have things like social recovery and all these great features that improve the user experience even further. And so that was kind of like the evolution of like wallet as a service or social logins into utilizing that with account abstraction was still our core product for a long time. And then this year, over the past 8 months or so, we've been really focused on sort of like expanding our tech stack and including one main problem in the space, which is the fragmentation and complexity across multiple chains. So the way that you can look at it is sort of like there's almost, and maybe I'm getting out of myself a little bit, but there's sort of like two sets of complexity in the space. One is within a given application, and so that's sort of solved with things like social logins and whatnot. It's making a certain application easy to use and creating a good experience within the confines of one application. This is great with account abstraction, with social logins, but there's a different type of user experience that has not really been addressed yet. And so this is the ecosystem wide user experience. So, how is the experience for a user that wants to go from application A to application B on different blockchains across different ecosystems? That experience has not really been addressed yet. And so, this is still a huge problem in the space because even if I can, get to a certain application with a great experience, if I want to go use a different application on a different chain, that process is pretty nightmarish. I mean, it's like I have to go find a bridge, I have to go deposit it into the bridge, I have to trust to some degree that this bridge is functional and safe, and then I get my funds and it's on a different network and a different wallet. I mean, it's miserable, right? So the multi-chain and ecosystem-wide UX is broken, and so this year we've kind of set our sights and we've been pushing a lot for this idea of chain abstraction, which has been a big topic as of recent because people have started to realize that this really is an unaddressed, an unrecognized problem. And so chain abstraction, with what we do, and we'll get into it later, we have something called universal accounts, which in its simplest way basically just give users the ability to have a single account with a single balance so they can use everywhere. So no bridging, no managing different networks, just use your balance from whatever application, whatever blockchain. And so that's basically what we're building now. It ties very closely in with social logins and account abstraction. So that's sort of the overview of Particle, very UX focused.
And that's I think that is something which should be right now for the whole industry itself, because like as I mentioned, that we saw that there are so many apps which are facing on the dev acquisition and getting more infra related project, but there are very few who are focusing and bringing account abstraction to such. And at Spheron we also believe it that web 2.5 or web, like, to focus on something which is creating more robust and user accessible is should be more focus of web3 apps than creating something which is euphoric to think of, but not yet usable, right? Because we have been seeing so many dApps and being like, once we started with Spheron, the whole idea of Spheron was to create usability and traction on it, while speaking of decentralization, and nothing specific to why decentralization is the only solution that is offered and will solve the global hunger or will solve the global problems, because it doesn't do that. We have to take these problems and substantially solve it at one step at a time. Like Speron is trying to build a permissionless infrastructure for GPU network and for AI, and which basically allows any user to become a provider on top of Spheron and also to utilize Spheron. So for it to become scalable, for it to become robust, or for it to be like for user A, B, C to utilize the network, and also become for X, Y, Z users to become a provider on the network needs to be pretty robust and is is functional in comparison to Web 2 companies which are like AWS, GCP, or Azure. And it should also be a solution which serves more timely and which has a better user experience, or not better, I would say. Composability is something which we are looking at, and I think Particle is also very focused on composability towards different applications, because abstraction comes into the play because when multiple tabs are building on top of you and you provide composability to them. And what we have seen with our time in the industry, that how we reached to this market fit and how we were able to utilize this market fit, is because we have been into the space for past 4 years now. And more than 4 years we understood what the market requires right now. And for example, if you want to create a app from scratch, what are the few things which are you are looking at initially, like in terms of authentication, in terms of compute, in terms of database, in terms of utilizing a chain. So this market maturity has come into play in some time. And also I feel we are there to focus on things which are right now, like we made supernoders, and I think I've mentioned about supernoders earlier to you as well, where you can spin your node easily. And we had discussions about how you can spin your node on, like, creating a node as a service, a deepened node as a service on top of Spheron. That is what we are behind. To create things which are scalable, robust, and user friendly for everybody. And I feel I see a lot of synergy with Particle, because Particle is also on the same roof, is under the same roof, where you're creating things and like you're solving very granular problems where people are onboarding on a day-to-day basis, and in terms of understand like what those things can be. But there is something which I really want to understand, like in terms of partnerships, and like Particle goes with 900 plus partnerships and 60 different ecosystem. And but I want to know that where Particle has been very impactful in the ecosystems, which you see that Particle has done a great job in terms of onboarding devs or users or infra. Like I want to know more about it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think first of all, before kind of diving into that, just kind of what you said, 100% agree. I think that one big thing and a big part of kind of the ethos that I think a lot of these more user experience focused companies, including ourselves, of course, focus on is that um, for developers and people who are building Web3, there are undeniable benefits to building on a blockchain. I think that, of course, the full extent of the use cases and the killer app for Web3 still is yet to be discovered or yet to be built. I mean, there's some great Polymarket and all these great things that have already been built. But I think that there's a recognition that developers want to build on Web3, and ideally there will be use cases, and there already are a lot of reasons that users want to use dApps. But the issue is that in a lot of cases, the benefits, the benefits for end users specifically, does not outweigh the sheer complexity involved with getting in and using it as an end user. And so there's this recognition of infrastructure that is basically required to uh, level the playing field here, right? So we want developers to be able to really use decentralized permissionless infrastructure to thrive on blockchain and build things that are truly unique that aren't possible in Web 2, but they need to have the user experience standards that allow them to do so and still take advantage of the larger internet and the people who are still Web 2. So I think this is really what Web 3 is missing at the moment to a large degree, is that the infrastructure to build powerful applications. I think Spheron is I would consider to be one of these more foundational infrastructure providers that are giving services and developers the ability to build decentralized and truly powerful on-chain applications and services. I think that this infrastructure has been built, and there's a ton of use cases that are possible, but for developers there still is a need, and this has been unmet as of now, and it's of course being worked on by us and many others. There's still a need for the gap to be bridged here between the possibilities of what you can build with Web3 and ultimately how this is used by end users, and how we can actually onboard enough people to the point where these applications become profitable and there's real revenue potential, right? And so I think that we're getting into that space now with things like chain abstraction and other various different UX narratives that are emerging. And so this is why it's been our core focus for so long, is because we see that these use cases are real and that there's been a lot of great implementations, but there just needs to be this accessibility of the market to where, and all of a sudden, when you have things like chain abstraction, when you have things like social logins and whatnot, the addressable market of an application goes from what would be maybe 20,000 people that have MetaMasks and are willing to connect to millions of people potentially they all have a Google account, they can use it very easily, they can deposit very easily these different things. And so this is the core thesis behind why focusing on user experience in tandem with more foundational core infrastructure that enables really the kind of building of these various different use cases. That's why it's so important. To talk about specifically partnerships and stuff like that, we have a very active BD team, and they do a fantastic job of sort of making sure that we have as much surface area, because for us, especially when it comes to things like public chains and certain dApps, the way that Particle is successful is having as many integrations as possible, because the more integrations that we have and the more dApps and chains that we support, the more surface area for this type of user experiences, right? And so I think at this point, like I said, I think it's 900 total dApps that have integrared.
Yeah,
Of that, a good chunk are
900 is a big
AAA.
number though. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a bit for the state of Web3 today, and it's there's a lot of different apps. I'm sure
Yeah.
most of the people that are in the audience, if you've actively gone to different games and social platforms and things that are a little more consumer facing, at some point you probably use Particle somewhere, because we've been fortunate enough to be integrated in a lot of these great initial applications in the ecosystem, and also we're very close with a lot of public chains. So this is a big important and a large part of our strategy is that these public chains at the moment, like pre the chain abstraction era, public chains are a big driver of integrations and innovation within Web3. They incentivize a lot of innovation. They have connections within all these ecosystems with all these developers. They drive all these new applications. And so a big part of our BD strategy and sort of like why we have all these partnerships is that we focus on establishing solid relationships with different blockchain core teams. And as a result, we can be very closely tied in with an ecosystem and really get down and support these applications and allow these different ecosystems to ultimately go from what would be not consumer ready to being consumer ready. And this will only be amplified by chain abstraction. I think that with chain abstraction, the whole landscape for what is prioritized from a partnership perspective and so on will change. And we can maybe talk a little bit more about that. But I always like talking about this topic, which is that I think with chain abstraction, what you're going to see, which is quite interesting, is that all of a sudden, right now, what you have in the landscape today is users and developers and so on that are basically locked in or isolated to a specific ecosystem or a few different specific ecosystems. So if I'm a developer, I'm building a DEX on Linea, then my ecosystem is Linea. If I'm a user, then maybe I have funds on 4 or 5 different chains. And so when you're building applications, you're building for a small market of users within a small ecosystem. You have the core team that's supporting and stuff like this. And this is like a very Web3 specific dynamic. It's like every part of Web3 is sort of siloed in these small subsectors of different public chains and their ecosystems and the users that have the funds on these. And gathering users is difficult. So you have a small set of users that use applications within these ecosystems, because otherwise the responsibility is that now you have to convince users to bridge into these ecosystems. So there's all these complexities with onboarding users today. But what's going to happen, we're going to see this shift, I think, in less than a year, is that with chain abstraction, with the proliferation of this infrastructure, not only what we're doing, but there's many other organizations that are doing this as well, and acting in different parts of the stack. What we're going to see is that all of a sudden we're going to see the shift of users and developers to some capacity, like not be confined to specific chains or ecosystems. And so all of a sudden right now, every user in this space, they only use a few different ecosystems because that's what's most convenient, because that's where they have their balances on. And so we're going to see this like flip switch all of a sudden where or this the switch is just going to like flip, and what's going to happen is that all these users that are currently siloed are going to be universalized to some degree. They're going to be agnostic to certain chains. And so users are going to turn into this universal resource. Every application on every different chain is going to have equal access to every user in the ecosystem, because there's no
And
boundaries to using these apps.
would that be done by like would you think like what would be the catalyst around it, like infra doing that, or is it going to happen through some app, or what do you feel like what happens, like does it happen through an infra, how does it that happen?
I think there's a lot of infrastructure today that's being built that will enable this type of movement quite soon. The kind of core things that you'll find is, from a user perspective, the things that we classify it as something called account level chain abstraction, which is basically chain abstraction that is applied to user accounts. So giving users the ability to have an account that has a balance that they can use anywhere. So the thing that silos users today in certain ecosystems is the requirement of bridging to move your funds across chains. That
Yeah.
little hurdle is what makes users siloed. And so if you remove this and give users accounts where I can have 10 ETH on Ethereum, 10 on Base, and 10 on Arbitrum, and I just have 30 ETH that I can use wherever I want, then they no longer have to bridge, and they no longer care about what chains that they're using. They just want to use applications, right? And so this will happen. A lot of the shift will happen with accounts. Also, what we're going to see as a big movement is for application developers. There's a lot of tools coming out that will allow application developers to basically create applications that are chain agnostic, that can interact across any chain on the ecosystem, that can kind of be that can use the benefits of multiple different blockchains, that can be deployed on an app chain and use things from Ethereum and Arbitrum and stuff like this, to where applications are going to escape the confines of certain chains through like orchestration and the ability to do complex cross-chain workflows and stuff like this through also what we call application level chain abstraction solutions. And so between these type kind of the evolution and the maturity of this infrastructure, all of a sudden users are universalized, so they aren't loyal to certain blockchains anymore. They just use applications, and developers to some degree are also universalized. And so I think this is going to change. Like, for example, now the goal is really, how do we get developers excited about this stack? How do we get them excited about this different tech that they're building with? And so the goal shifts completely from trying to do all these complex partnerships with chains and infrastructure stuff like that, and it shifts towards, how do we just make the best experience for developers? How do we encourage them to build
Exactly, the
truly
DX,
innovative
which yeah,
applications? Exactly. And then
yeah.
that translates to users, because now users, they have better applications because developers have better incentives to build better apps, and so on. So that
I
is
really
one of them.
feel that whatever infrastructure which has a better DX and which focuses on actual uh, developer onboarding actually leads to applications being built on top of that infra, which leads to being better UX being built on top of that. Like even in terms of use cases, like when you see like things like Vercel or like Mongo or all of these things, where you can see that the usability and the DX is pretty straightforward, which leads to more developers building on top of it, and which eventually leads to more users in such. So I feel like this is a very important part of any like product reclamation. Like let's say if I'm building a product and it is easy for a developer to directly create that product, it would lead in terms of more volume, and it would lead in terms of more capacity for people to build on top of that infra, which leads to more user being onboarded on that infra, and even whatever dapps or application that has been built on that. So that I feel is truly very important for any project to foresee. Like even in terms of number of partnerships, like what Particle has done as an amazing job, right? 900, speaking to 900 people. I don't know how big is your BD team. I really want to know.
It's not too big. We have, I think, around three in total at this point. Of course, we're a pretty small
Wow.
team, so we do a lot of cross BD and stuff like that. But yeah, we are a small machine, but pretty efficient.
Are you aware of this BD versus DevRel which is going on Twitter right now? Like, did you
I
happen to
am.
get like get a air of this? Who are you supporting in this? I
It's
I
hard.
got
I
to
don't
ask.
know. I gotta say, I do DevRel, but I commented on somebody's post. I was like, to be honest, a lot of DevRels, they do very BD like things, and so the two roles, I think, overlap a lot more than people think. And so I know a lot of DevRels, which are basically just BD people, but they know a little bit of technical stuff. And so yeah, I
Yeah,
think, yeah, it's a hard battle. I think it really depends on the team. BD can be immensely impactful. I think it's really important. DevRel is a really tricky thing to get right. I think most organizations have trouble having efficient and effective DevRel. I just think it's like sometimes a lot of people don't really understand the the scope of DevRel and how it needs to be handled. And people usually just see it as like too broadly or too narrowly, and they don't. Yeah. So I think
yeah,
that's a whole conversation, like how DevRel is handled. So
yeah.
I think usually BD is
That's
easier
a
to get
new
right.
stream.
Right. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is something I think we need to get more people on, like so many people on this.
Right.
But yeah, I really want to know from you, like when I say like in next 10 years, I ask you like Ethan, like what you feel Particle is going to be. Are you going to have the same glow up light behind you in next 10 years, or Particle is going to grow into something bigger, something different? Or what do you see for Particle to happen?
I hope I have the same light behind me, because it's pretty cool. It's a pretty nice sign. But yeah, I think like ultimately, oh, and I've been thinking about this a little bit as well. Like what, both for Particle as well as just generally like this type of infrastructure, like chain abstraction and user experience infrastructure that is meant to improve the user experience and not really be known by users. And so this is an interesting question, because it's like, will Particle as a brand and will all these other providers as a brand remain brands when they're building infrastructure that's meant to be hidden and just silently improving the user experience? And so I think in the most successful scenario, users are not going to know what Particle Network is necessarily, unless like they go and do some deeper research. And same thing with all the other infrastructure. I think in like the far future, what we're going to see most likely is that this infrastructure will be universally used. It's going to be used across the ecosystem. It'll significantly improve the user experience, and users are just going to use applications. And so this is the simplest way that it'll go, is that in the future, I think 10 years, who knows what's going to happen with crypto, but especially like over the next few years, I think we're going to get to an environment where it'll be as simple as just, I want to go use an application, I use it, there's no strings attached to it, I don't need to worry about any of the million different things you have to do worry about with Web3 today. And so I think that's really the goal that we want to go towards. And I think if that is successful, then all the infrastructure that's backing that will just be silently backing that. And so every user will have this great experience, powered by this infrastructure, but it's not like we're telling them what infrastructure is, or it's not like they're hyper aware of this. It's the same way, like, for example, we're on Restream right now. I don't know if Restream's using AWS or GCP or whatever. I don't really care. I mean, I just see that it's working pretty well, right? So like this is how it works, and so I think this is ultimately ourselves as well as many other infrastructure providers. I think if everything is successful, it'll be an invisible, silent, universal benefit to the user experience into the space.
I think one of the best designs in the world are the most forgettable ones. You like, and you don't know they exist, that because they are so prone to, like, I was watching the stream with Kanye, and he sometimes say a lot of crazy stuff, but sometimes he makes a lot of meaning, and he said that one of the best designs is to be become forgettable. And I feel that this is the line for Sphero as well. Like, Sphero is behind it to create something which is more robust and which is so invisible for users to see and utilize, and yet it is everywhere, and being supported supports through every app or application which is built throughout. And even, like, we have started to use ChatGPT, but it has become just a day thing of the day, like, which is just an extension towards your work and not actually trying to replace you, or do some sort of stuff which is a very different narrative, but yet it has become something which is the first go-to place. And what I see is that ChatGPT has onboarded, like, even my parents use ChatGPT now. That's insane, right? Because those guys have no experience whatsoever, know what inferencing is, know what data training is, what data it's been trained on, but they understand how easy it is. And I think every infra project should focus on becoming invisible and forgettable. That, like, that's a very great point you uh, put out, like. And I think every infrastructure should learn from this, like, how to become more forgettable. I'm going to write a tweet about it someday. And yeah, there are a lot of drafts which need to go first. And, like, I feel the last things which I wanted to discuss is the few things where I want to focus on what Particle is doing right now. Like, what is the next steps in the roadmap for Particle for few days, for few months, and, like, how does it look for Particle?
Yeah, definitely. I think just real quick, you mentioned kind of ChatGPT as an example of invisible infrastructure and a successful use case of AI and stuff like that. I think that in Web3, and I've been waiting for this for a long time, and I'm still waiting for it, but hopefully someday. What I want is Web3 to have its like ChatGPT moment where some
Yeah,
product comes out, something, and it uses all this infrastructure and all these innovations that we've been culminating for so long to create something that is truly unique and not possible with other infrastructure. And people have this sort of like light bulb moment with Web3 where they're like, okay, I get it.
yeah,
Or I understand this, like this the kind of like new paradigm that we're going towards. And like with
yeah,
AI, I remember trying OpenAI's Playground years and years ago, and it was awful. I mean, like it was at that time. It was impressive to me. I was like, oh wow, I could ask it this question. It could spit out gibberish basically. But um, it was compared to today, it was totally unusable. It was ridiculous. It was totally gimmicky. It was never be integrated anywhere. But in just 2 or 3 years of AI, all of a sudden, there's these innovations and these small increments and these breakthroughs. And there's a product now that if you go ask anybody in the street, they know exactly what it is. They probably use it day to day. And so it was just this one thing that needed to happen as a result of years and years of infrastructural evolution that then results in the explosion of this entire industry. And so I hope something similar will happen to Web3, where all this infrastructure that we're working on eventually will kind of build up towards this experience that will really catch a lot of people's eyes, and people will understand, like, I get it now. If they didn't before, same
yeah.
thing like with AI. Like AI had a lot of skepticism for a long
It should
time.
click in a moment,
It
right?
should click,
Like,
right? Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's like people I hate to say it, like, it should, like, I even read that meme, like, shut up data driven person, the vibes guy speaking. But yeah, it's actually about the vibe. Like, it should really click with the users whenever they are being onboarded. And whenever, like, when, like, right now, when we run, like, models like GPT-2 or all of on our infrastructure, like, for even for testing purpose, like, right now we are giving away Spheron for testing to researchers and people who are there, and we are also testing out, creating different use cases. Like, we have also trying to work with Particle as well, and forging out use case with Particle. So when we see that it has functioned into something more mature in some amount of time, like let's say X amount of time, it it would definitely exponentially go up, and there are going to be cross times where something can come up, like because see, like for even for AI, there has been so much work. Like if you go out and if you see the TensorFlow documentation back in 2015 and you see it now, there is a difference of day and night between it. And that's what we have been all focusing on, to create an environment there that light bulb moment can happen, because in that affinity or in that magnitude, it creates more chances of it to happen, right? Because there are so many things being built right now, and so many test trial and tests going on right now, like even polymarket. I feel that's a great example for initializing what push like it needed. And it's not as a narrative itself, but in terms of UX usability and all of that stuff, which is important, which is what Swellon and Particle have been working on for so long. And I think this is going to be the last segment of my question. And like I would tell what is next for Spheron. So Spheron is already onboarding a lot of researchers and users, and we have been partnering with a lot of projects in past time. And now what we have been doing is that all of these researchers we have onboarded, we have opened a bounty for them to create different use cases on top of these machines. Like we are lending out different RTX 4090s, A6000s, H100 to get started on and these provides you with access to a decentralized infrastructure where you can build things on top of it. And we have these, like I would give the link in the description, and I would love to see Particle also coming up with some bounties for it, because we have a lot of partners are posting up different type of bounties on top of it, like creating token predictor, even uh, AI based girlfriend and boyfriend. It's for fun. Definitely, it's for fun. But yeah, like you can create on top of it. And I don't know if there are anime fans out there, but I love the manga creator, and I would be personally working on manga creator itself to create my own manga, and also to create like videos from stability and a lot of stuff which is happening in this space. And we want you to utilize decentralized infra and bring real case use cases on top of it. And once we are done, we would be doing some announcement on how Spheron's nodes are going to look like, and that is something which is pretty secret right now, but we would give you some sneak peek pretty soon. But thank you so much, Tabasco, for being here. Like it's always great to meet with you, and I hope I see you in. By any chance, are you coming to Token 2049 Singapore?
I will be there. It's going to be a long
Yeah.
trip
So
from
let's.
from
Yeah.
Denver, but let's meet up there for sure.
You're coming from Denver. Oh, best of luck.
I am.
So
Yeah, I think it's 19, 20 hours, something like that. But I'm looking forward to it. It'll be good. It's going to be a good week. Let's definitely let's find a time to meet up there for sure.
absolutely. So thank you so much, guys, for watching this, and see you in the next stream. Thank you so much, Ethan, for becoming a part of this, and see you.